All right, cool. Well, Matt, it's so good to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out. I'm looking forward to peeling back the layers of your life and your world, being an award-winning author. So thank you.
Thanks, Joe. I really appreciate it.
You bet. So let's begin. I always begin with 5 years ago, there was the pandemic was changing our lives. So much was happening. How much of living, how did you get through it, and how much of living through that has changed the way that you approach life today?
Oh my gosh. So that's a can of worms right off the bat there. So what happened for me during the pandemic is of course like everybody, we lost some friends and things like that, people we knew. But it actually totally refocused me. I mean, if you talk about a silver lining, it totally refocused me. In fact, it was only a few years before that that I had earned tenure at my university. So I was a 10-year full professor, right? Which is the dream. If you're in academics, it's the dream. Now I can do anything I want. I don't kind of a thing. Don't tell everybody that, but that's what we think inside. The ivory tower is, I'm now a 10-year full professor. I got to do something like super bad to lose my job. Otherwise, I've got security here.
Yeah.
And uh, and then the pandemic happened, and so the university started reshuffling everything. And here's what we're going to do: we're going to go to remote. We're going to do this. Now I teach in a clinical discipline, athletic training, so it's very hands-on. We're evaluating knees and injured shoulders, and all in the sports medicine context there. So a lot of what I teach, orthopedic assessment, it's very hard to do that remotely. Matter of fact, I would say it's impossible. You've got to help the students, proper hand placement, proper feel. I mean, it's very, very clinical, hands-on kind of a thing. So it's very difficult to teach that virtually. So that frustrated me. And there were and I did it because that's what we needed to do, and it was no problem. But it was like there has to be something better kind of thing. And along that same time, I was offered an opportunity to transition to a new faculty role at a different institution. Now, that might not sound like a big deal, except for the fact that I was a tenured full professor, and tenured full professors, unless they have something wrong with their heads, don't leave those jobs. It's you work so hard to get to that place, and finally you're there. Well, had that happened a little bit before COVID or even a little bit after COVID, I would have said absolutely no way. And I did actually say absolutely no way. I'm a tenured professor kind of a thing. And they kept persisting. And it was an opportunity to start a new doctoral program in athletic training. There's a doctor of athletic training program. So a new doctoral program in athletic training that focused exclusively on it was like created just for me, my content area, which was leadership, administration, decision making. That's my research background within that sports medicine context. And so they wanted to start this new DAT. And long story short is they offered, I asked for the moon. I'm like, listen, I have nothing to lose here. So if you really want me that bad, here's what it's going to take. And I just laid it all out there. And my wife and I just were like flabbergasted when 2 weeks later, they're like, okay, we got it. We got it all. Everything. I said, everything. They're like, everything you asked for, we got it. And it just blew my mind. So now I was at a real pivot point, a real decision point. Do I stay or do I take this leap and essentially give up tenure and kind of start over now and all the things that come with that? And we decided to do it. And I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that if it happened before COVID or after COVID, I would have never done it. But because the tension were high, the frustration was high, it was just enough frustration to get me to make that leap, just enough disruption to get me to make a change. And that was 5 years ago or 4 years ago. And I love it. I mean, I've been just doing everything I've always wanted to do, teaching the people I want to teach, creating the curriculum I want to create. I've had opportunities since then to write a couple books. I'm able to write a couple books, and it's just been fantastic.
So if you had to break down your day for a bunch of 12-year-olds at career day to understand what you do for a living, how do you answer a child that asks you, "What do you do for a living?"
So what I do for a living is teach. I mean, if I really break it down for kids, I'm a teacher who teaches adults. And that would be the difference is I teach adults to learn how to do um, critical thinking, leadership. I teach adults to be better leaders, is what I would tell a child. I mean, that's really what I do.
So when you were 12 years old, what was your dream gig? What did you want to grow up and become?
Oh my gosh. So I like every 12-year-old kid, I wanted to be a famous athlete. I was a big baseball fan, a big football fan, and so that's what I wanted. I wanted to be a famous athlete, but the truth be told, I always was fascinated by leaders and leadership. Now I think that came from my dad and the kind of stuff he was interested in, but deep down, I was a good athlete, but I wasn't a great athlete. I captain of the team, but a small school, that kind of thing. So I had athletic capacity, but I knew that I wasn't going to happen. So my backup plan was always, I want to be a leader in the sports industry somehow, somewhere. And so that's kind of it. But in my heart of hearts, it's like, yeah, I want to be a superstar athlete.
It's interesting. We probably come from the same generation. When I think about leadership and tying in that sports thing, there were so many monoliths of coaches that were happening at that time. I mean, you had Mr. Wooden at UCLA, you had all of these other people, and they didn't just seem like coaches like today. They seemed like dignitaries. Like
Yeah.
they were almost like presidents and these people that had this wide-ranging glow about them that could get their athletes to do anything.
True sages. They were true sages. You mentioned John Wooden. When I raised my kids on John Wooden stuff. Matter of fact, they're grown and gone out of the house now and have their own families and all that. But still down in my basement, we have a little weight room down in my basement. And still to this day, on the wall that my son made and printed was John Wooden's pyramid.
Yeah,
And it's on the wall, taped right next to the weight machines
that's
down
it.
there. And fortunately, I just talked to my oldest son just a few days ago, and he's in vet school now and living his dream and doing that. And he still mentions that from time to time. But you're
Wow.
absolutely right. Those old coaches were absolute sages they were just brilliant.
Yeah, they were sages. So take me back to your childhood. Where were you born and raised?
So I was born and raised in Toledo, Ohio, in
Okay.
the Rust Belt, they call it.
Okay. So what were the foundational elements of sports, leadership, getting into education, all of these different seeds that were sown? How did this grow and evolve into who you are today?
Oh my goodness, another long story. So my dad, so I grew up a pastor's kid. My dad was a pastor, so I was a PK.
Yeah.
What's different about that is my dad was he was a very reasonable man. He wasn't it was my dad was fun, and he was a huge Civil War buff. And so we grew up around the dinner table, talking about Civil War strategies, famous generals, and he was the kind of guy who got the little guys, and he would paint them under the microscope and
Yep.
recreate the battle scenes in the basement. He had this whole big thing set up with different battles and different things, and we'd have to watch Patton every year when it came out with them and all these kinds of things. And so he was a huge fit. So that's where I think the leadership interest came from. And then, of course, watching him in his role as a pastor, how he did the things that he did was very interesting to me. And so I remember going to college and after my freshman year, deciding that I was going to change my major to like Christian ministry studies or something like that because I was going to do what he did because that's what I saw. And Joe, I don't know too many dad pastors who would say this, but he literally told me. I remember this was back in the day. We had a calling card on Saturday or Sunday night because it was 10 cents a minute cheaper. You're at a payphone at the end of the dorm hall, and so I'm talking to him on the phone, and I tell him, "Hey, Dad, I think I want to change my major from athletic training, which is what I was in." To like Christian ministry kind of thing because I'm going to be a pastor like you. And he said, over my dead body.
Wow.
He's like don't you even think of that for a second. And I said, well, of course, why? And he's like, there's so many times. I mean, he goes, ministry's hard. People suck the life out of you. And I don't mean to degrade churches or anything like that, but people are hard. They're hurting. They're in pain. He goes, it's a hard job, Matt. It's not like physically demanding, but it's emotionally demanding like that. And he said, there have been so many times that I wanted to get out of ministry to do like a real regular job, and I couldn't.
Yeah.
And he goes, so don't blow that opportunity. So stay in your major. If you want to get a ministry, you can. You go to seminary or something later, but I want you to have a career that you can get into. And so I did. So I stayed in my major and followed my course, and then got a master's degree. It was back then it was a traditional graduate assistantship model. So I got a graduate assistantship with a Division I football program, got my master's degree, but also was basically a staff on the athletic department staff, and did all that and worked, and then graduated with my master's degree and went on and started working clinically. And then the unimaginable happened, and my father passed away suddenly, and just kind of a freak thing. And so all of a sudden the church is now left in the thing. So they asked me, of all people. It's just like, I don't have any training for this whatsoever. I mean, I could tape your ankle really good if you fall down the stairs on Sunday morning or something, but I'll help how I can. So I actually quit my athletic training job and went into pastoring full time, and that only lasted about 3 years before I realized I can't do this job. And ironically enough, at that same moment when I'm fighting this, existential crisis, when it really was, my wife and I were both in the middle of it. Should we, shouldn't we? What are we doing? This is what we thought we always wanted, but we hate it, kind of a thing. And right at that time, I got an invitation to intern at the United States Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs,
Yeah.
and work with some, well, the best athletes in the world in the best sports facility in the world, right? And so I took that opportunity. It was just a 2 week kind of a micro internship over the summer, and realized when I was there, yeah, this is what I love, And now it's not really fair because, like I said, it's the best athletes in the best facility. But I met a guy there, and this isn't the story how it always goes. I met a guy there who was my roommate. He was another athletic trainer from Oklahoma. And he said to me after like our first week or something like that, we hit it off really well. He happened to be the director of sports medicine for USA Track and Field. So we hit it off really well. And he's like, he was a professor as well. And he's like, you'd be a great professor. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not even a real athletic trainer anymore. I'm kind of a pastor. I'm just doing this to scratch some itches. And anyways, he comes back and he convinces me to throw out some resumes for some faculty jobs. I don't know how he did it. My wife and I, to this day, still scratch our head, and he's still our friend today. And but I did, and wouldn't you know it, one of the people I applied to was like, "Yeah, we think we'd like you down here. We think you could be our program director." And long story short, I call it this a three beer story, but long story short, I find myself down in South Florida as a faculty member, and so there I am doing the thing. First year's done with that. The dean really likes what I'm doing, but she tells me, listen, you can't stay doing what you're doing or get any reasonable promotions or a reasonable salary. Because I had young family at the time, very young family, like an infant and a 18-month-old, without getting your doctoral degree. You're going to have to get your doctoral degree so you can get in the tenured track lane and all that kind of stuff. So I did. I mean, it was again a very hard decision for my wife and I because we certainly didn't have the money for it and all that. But anyways, got my PhD. The day I finished my PhD, this guy who I met back at Colorado Springs called me. We had developed a friendship. I started traveling with USA Track and Field. In fact, went to Brazil, went to South Korea with Team USA, did some international track meets with them. It was a blast. And at any rate, the day I finished my PhD, he's like, "Hey, I've been had this ulterior motive all along. Will you work with me?" And he had moved from Oklahoma to Texas. Now he was at Texas State. So again, long story short, I end up at Texas State as the program director of their athletic training program,
Wow.
who just finished my doctoral degree in global leadership of all things. So only thing I could do in a convenient way, working full time, it was one of these adult night evening program PhD things, and so I didn't really have a PhD in athletic training or sports medicine, but global leadership, so I had to find a way to tie that into what I was doing in sports medicine. So I created a niche for myself, and that's really what happened. So now I'm a recognized, leader thought leader in the leadership space within the sports medicine community, and so that's how I merged all of that together.
That's beautiful. So who's been your hero? Who's been your inspirational force that's navigated you through your career?
Oh, for sure, my dad. You know, and he's been passed away for 25 years more now, but you know, especially when I was young, my dad was my hero. I still to this day ask myself, you know, what would dad do? You know, what would dad do? And so he's been, you know, obviously personal in my life. I was just turned 30 when he passed away.
Well,
And so that was crazy, but yeah, it would be my dad for sure.
so if you could interview one sports mind or one leader that's out there that might help you on your journey, who would you love to sit down and talk to that's alive
Phil
today?
Jackson. Phil
Okay.
Jackson.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's fascinating, man.
Yeah. And the reason is, you know, here's another part of the story. You know, when I was working on my PhD, you know, come dissertation time, I had to frame, you know, what was I going to study? You know, I'm in a global leadership program, but I'm an athletic training professional. How does that work? And I thought to myself, you know, I had developed a philosophy of leadership that said, and I still promote that, it's called contextual intelligence, that, you know, leadership isn't idiosyncratic. It's not unique to a specific role or job, at least authentic leadership isn't. And yet we always teach it that way. It's like, well, if you're in sales, here's a leadership course for salesmen. If you're in government, here's a leadership course for government. If you're in retail, here's a leadership course, you know, whatever you're in, you know, that kind of a thing. And I begin to wonder if there's crossover in leadership behaviors. Are there leadership skills that one person uses in every context they find themselves in, especially if they change? Now, I was modeling myself because I had started out in athletic training, went into pastoral ministry, then went into education. And so I had three completely different industries in my own background. And I wondered, you know, I kind of use the same leadership skills everywhere I go. Are there universal skill sets there that people use? And I thought of Phil Jackson at the time because even part of my question when I was proposing my idea to my dissertation committee was like, we know Phil Jackson is a great coach. He's won championships with a hybrid of personalities on his teams. You know, you Dennis Rodman, Michael Jackson, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen. You know, all these guys. He had quite a few personalities he had to manage, and he won in everywhere he was. But I said, I wonder if we were to take, because we know he's a great coach and can win, would he be able to win in the NFL? Just knowing what he knows, not adding any special knowledge to him, but just knowing what he knows about leadership, about motivation, about people. Could we put him on an MLB team or an NFL team and get him to win there? And the question was, I don't know. So that's what I wanted to study. So I was like, are there leadership skills? So that kind of comes in. And so I studied Phil Jackson earlier in those days, and I thought, you know, I would love to sit down and pick his brain on his philosophy of leadership and what skills he think he might be able to use in a completely different sport.
For sure. What is your motivation every day to wake up to do this work that you do? To not only do it at a high level, but to take care of your soul and your life.
Yeah. So yeah, a big part of what I do is the joy that I get from helping others lead better. And you know, I that might sound cliche. I hope it doesn't, but it's really, really true. I was telling my wife even last night, we were just went on a little date night, and I told her last night that it was, you know, I'm very serious about the fact, even when I take new doctoral students or new students, I've never asked one of my students to do my research or my work. A lot of faculty do that. You come on, you're my grad assistant, whatever, you're going to do my research as you're learning kind of a thing. I've never done that. I actually have an ethical issue with that. It's like, no, my job is to help you become good at discovering what you want to research, what you want to do. And that's really what brings me joy is helping my students or anybody. I do a lot of mentoring. I'm still very involved in our church and stuff like that. So the mentoring that I do there is I want to help you discover what you get excited about and then help you develop a way to pursue that and become better. And that's what really gets me excited.
So, of everything that you've done, accomplished, and evolved to, what are you the proudest of?
Oh my gosh. I'm That's a great question because there's a long list of things that I could say, and I've done some pretty neat things. But if truth be told, the thing I am legitimately most proud of is a very healthy and good 32-year marriage.
Yeah.
Despite all the things, all because I'm that guy, I'm that husband that walks in the door one day and will tell my wife, "Hey, I didn't mention this to you because I didn't think it would really happen, but I applied for this Fulbright scholarship, which is a big deal, and I got it, and we're moving to Rwanda in 4 weeks." And she's like, "What?" You did, kind of a thing. And it's like, "Yeah, so we're gonna have to, it's either sell the house or get somebody to move in because we're gonna be gone for like 8 months." Living in Rwanda. And we've got, a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old son. Yeah, we're going to take him out of school. We're going to homeschool him while we're over there. So, I'm that kind of a guy. And so she's a saint. But truly, truly, I am most proud of a 32-year marriage that is strong.
So at the end of the day, Matt, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, all of your students, everyone that you work with, everyone that reads your books, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Oh my gosh. This is a hard question. Who do I think I am? Um, I'll tell you what I put on my bio when people ask me, send me a bio. I say Matt Kutz is a father, husband, and friend, and desires to help people, develop their full potential. And then in his spare time, he is a professor at FIU, award-winning author, TEDx speaker, all that kind of stuff. And so I'd like to think of myself as a man who is deeply committed to his family, and that's really where it's at for me. And the
So
rest of the
let's have,
stuff is just side
yeah,
side benefit.
I totally get it. So let's have a little fun here. What's the most intense, memorable sporting event you've ever attended? And if you could get into a time machine and go see one game, where are you
Okay.
going?
The most intense is 1995 Las Vegas Bowl. We were there. It was University of Toledo playing, I believe it was Reno, Nevada. And it was the first ever college overtime football game.
Wow.
It was the very first time they instituted earlier in the season that year, midway through. No one had had one yet, and the bowl season was the like the trial run. So we were there, and the game was tied at the end. So we went into overtime, and no one knew what to do, how this was going to work, and we ended up winning that game in overtime for the first ever. And it was a super sketch kind of a thing. It's like, was he in? Wasn't he in? Did he cross the line? And then of course you got to defend the other side for they get their one chance. And it was crazy. But we ended up winning that game. And so that was pretty intense moment for sure.
Right on. So what?
And then
Yeah.
I could go back. Yeah, if I could go back and watch one of the greatest games, I would, at least for me, and of course I'm near Detroit. I'm a Lions fan, a Tigers fan, a Pistons fan, a Red Wings fan, and it wouldn't be too far in history because I remember because I was a teenager at the time, but I would go back and watch the 1984 NBA playoffs again, the Pistons, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then
So,
that's a hard choice because there's a
yeah.
lot. I mean, my head's
Oh,
now spinning. Like, should I have said that? Because there's a
yeah.
lot of great games.
Totally. Yeah. There's so many things. You almost need to have a string of events. So, Becoming Epic is the new book. If anybody wants to get a copy and of your previous work, reach out. Any of the good business, where do they go?
MatthewKutz.com.
Okay. Excellent. Matthew, what a joy, man. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you
Thanks,
for your
Joe. Really
story.
appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it too.